Still, I would say good morning, thank you. So I'm very happy that I can be here. Need to say I really like this conference, and also Budapest is a very beautiful city. So, and I really like your introductory note because the regulation is also about the trust. And with artificial intelligence, currently we are having this problem with the trust. And how we can trust to AI, how we can trust to probabilistic outcomes of artificial intelligence, and how should we interpret our current and new laws for in the logic of how AI works. Because with AI, like traditional legal system works on a very easy base. Yeah, if you claim something that is true, you need to prove it. But AI had this problem which is called black box, that you cannot explain how AI is working exactly, which data are responsible for bad outcomes, and so on. So we are facing this, and this is something which Europe or the other countries needs to react. The problem is that regulation is always following new technologies. We cannot invent good regulations before technology is implemented. Therefore, if we want to have some reasonable laws, we need to somehow understand this technology. And I wanna, this presentation will be not about how regulation should work, it will be much more practical. It will be about regulatory logic and how to explain AI Act, and specifically how to apply it in general sense, and also what are the main obligations for financial sector within the AI, because there are some specialties. And we already have like many cases of AI or similar system which failed significantly, especially in the States. I will mention some example of it. And we do have some rules, like to be transparent and so on, which we would like to address. I will explain what was the process of the AI Act and how it was implemented, how it was totally broken by generative artificial intelligence, and what's very important in the practice, because right now probably everybody in this room is using any AI solutions, even if you don't know about it, like probably like Gemini, Claude, if you're using Office 365, you're using some PDF summaries, we are all using generative AI within our daily lives. And it's also very important to mention that with this let's say we are not going to implement very specific AI tool. Let's say we are just using ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, some chatbot, yeah, like no obligations at all, even if we are using it in financial institution, in the faculty. But what's very important to know about AI, it's not like that. Because if your employees can, let's say you have like HR department and they use ChatGPT because they like ChatGPT because it's a great tool, you will just upload 10 CVs and pick up me the best candidate for this description of the role, and ChatGPT will describe you something. Automatically you have like high-risk system within your company or within your society and responsible for all of the risks. So you need to react, you need to have some internal guidelines how to prevent that from practical perspective, and you need to know how to do this regulation. So let's go with it, and let's start how AI Act and financial sector works exactly. Right now, what we have, I wouldn't say a problem, but let's say a trend. We are applying, or we are trying to have much more regulation within the European Union, and the European Union is the very first in the world with implementing new regulations. Like there is this saying, if you have more regulations, then you don't have that economic growth. And we can see that because in the United States, when President Trump assumed the office, they also fired director of copyright office because her opinions about fair use and copyright law. Also, he canceled the previous presidential order by President Biden on AI, and they don't want to regulate AI. It's better when you can do whatever you want. But in Europe, we kind of don't like to do that. We do have Data Act, we do have Data Governance Act, we do have AI Act, we do have GDPR, and all other regulatory frameworks which are very hard to implement because they are written in a very general way. So let's interpret them and what are the obligations. So the very first relationship between the AI Act and already existing financial service laws are that they should be complementary implemented. So AI Act, even in some clauses, if you are regulated financial institutions, there is some exception. For example, for Article 19 in the Act for Quality Management System, if you already have quality management system implemented by any other regulated financial service law, you don't need to oblige with that, with few exceptions. I will mention them later. So they are working in parallel, and ideally, like no parallel compliance regime for regulatory financial institution. That's also true for some high-risk system in other, let's say, toys. They are also regulated by AI Act. Cars are also regulated by AI Act, but also toys and cars are heavily regulated by other European directives and so on. Therefore, we need to know that they are not trying to supersede or somehow change what is written. Otherwise, we should look at it from one perspective and should apply both in the most easy way possible. So that's the objective. I'm not sure if European Commission actually accomplished this goal, but that's the objective. AI governance should be always embedded into internal government and risk management framework. And objective, there is a coherence between AI regulation and financial supervision, but still there are like spots which we will address in this presentation, which are kind of problematic. Very first obligation is AI literacy obligation. In the very first draft of this Article 4 within Act, it does not exist in the very first draft provided by European Commission. Actually, this was added by Parliament because they wanna have these obligations for all deployers and providers to ensure sufficient AI literacy. From the perspective of the regulatory framework, like this obligation, it's very, very general. So probably it will be not that hardly enforced, but how to explain or what are these expectations from European Parliament and Commission how to implement this AI literacy obligation. So basically it applies to staff and other persons operating AI system within the company, either if you're a provider, so we are providing some AI services to other companies, or you are deployers that are using some other AI systems within your company. How to grasp that, and one professor, a Nordic professor in the IRIS conference in Vienna last year had very, very good point that basically it's AI driving license. Yeah, and also like AI regulations, it's very similar to, if you see like the roles, you have importer, distributor, you have deployer, you have a user, and so on. It's very similar to the product directives, let's say. So you need to have some technical knowledge and experience, so you need basically know how AI works, what are the black box problem, which problem can be caused by AI. You need to provide some training, very similar, like you need to drive a car. You need to know the context of AI system use and natural persons affected by the AI systems. So, but as you already know, there is digital omnibus, and actually, like as I mentioned in the very beginning, it was not proposed by Commission. So Commission is actually right now trying to abolish these conditions, and they want to do it even more general, that not providers and deployers should be responsible for AI literacy, but member states should be responsible for AI literacy. We will see how it will goes with digital omnibus, but for now, this is enforceable, and right now it is in place that if you're using any AI system within financial institution or any other institutions, you should have some AI training, AI literacy in place. That's the very first thing which need to be said. And also, we do have like how AI Act works. Like with AI, AI is basically everywhere. Even if you are doing like the scan of the documents and you're using optical character recognition on your printers or scanners, you know, that's AI, and a very good example of AI, because they are if you have just the paper as this, it could be easily resolved by AI that what's A would be what's the C, and you can copy paste text. Yeah, that's the AI. But do we want to regulate also like the scanners? In some states, for example, in Slovakia, we had a case when our Ministry of Digitalization is trying to do that, but we told them that maybe that's not the best approach, that we don't want to regulate everything. So, and that's also the regulation principle provided us by AI Act. We have 4 risk types. And just keep in mind that this was developed before ChatGPT became big, or any other natural large language models. We have unacceptable risk, which is described in Article 5. Basically, if you have, let's say that social scoring, manipulative detectives, biometric identifications on a remote basis and so on, there are certain exceptions, but generally they are prohibited practice, and we will not do social scoring within the European Union. But there is also, European Union does not have this beautiful German word competence, which means that only member states, it's competence. Therefore, European Union cannot enact any law. So basically, they cannot regulate, let's say, intelligence services, army, and any other things. Because, for example, with bigger companies such as Martin Lockheed and so on, they are also developing some AI solutions, which will be probably prohibited. But AI Act does not apply on that, and that's also important to mention. That there is also carve out from Article 5, which, but there are very specific things also like open source software and some others. There is high risk, and high risk is defined in Article 6 and so on. And if you're in high risk, I will explain it later, you have many problems because like whole regulation is basically, all obligations are usually tied to high-risk AI systems. So if you don't have high risk, and I will explain later what does it mean, what's high risk from the point of view of Commission, you have not the problem, but you need to make some regulatory changes within your company. Then you have limited risk, and that's mentioned in Article 50 of AI Act. And within this article, it's very easy. If you are using any deepfakes, if you are using any chatbot, you should, like people who are interacting with this system should know that this is AI-generated response. Like, in general, you can say that if you have any person who will take responsibility for the text, you don't need to do that. Or even if you know from the copyright law, if there's any kind of fun or satire or pastiche, you don't need to actually inform user about it. But I recommend to do so because sometimes we are not sharing the same sense of humor like everybody. So it's good to mention that this picture or something was AI generated or not. And there is like minimal risk, and this is like the OCR within the printers or scanners. They are AI system for sure, based on the Article 3, Para 1, but we don't want to regulate and write long internal guidelines for how to use printers safely. So what are the prohibited AI? I just choose few which could be very interesting for financial sector from my perspective. We do have manipulation and deception. AI may not use subliminal, manipulative, or deceptive techniques to matter or distort consumer behavior, particularly where this impair autonomy, very important word, or causes significant financial harm. And let's say banks, insurance providers, they do have access to a lot of data. And if you want to earn money, very easy. Data is the new gold. So you can analyze the patterns of your of consumers. You can provide them with very, you know, what they react to, what they like to. And if you will be using this to promote, let's say, your services, that you have like some transaction history, and you know that let's do something very specific. Let's implement some AI system which will be providing very specific recommendation for financial products based on your history, your credit scores, not credit score, but your score within the bank. Then it could be seen as manipulative and this deception practice, so be careful also about that. Exploitation of vulnerabilities. AI may not exploit vulnerabilities linked to age, disability, or socio-economic situations. If you know that there is always overdraft on the bank account and you want to try, and based on your AI system, they will provide them, yeah, take this loan, it's the great idea, just 20% per annum. Maybe that's also not the best use of AI system, and also social scoring. There is also a problem where we shouldn't do biometric categorization. AI may not enter sensitive attributes, race, political opinions, origin, trade union membership, sexual orientation from biometric data, prevents discriminatory profiling, customer segmentation. This is used, by the way, in the United States. Because I will tell you later some example, but we have just 8 minutes, so I would be rather quickly about that. Also, emotion recognition at work is prohibited, and the fraud detection carve-out, and that's very important for finance. You will find the recital 42, and if you have any like fraud detection within a financial institution, usually it's based on some transaction history, persons, and actually there is the clash between the classification or some profiling or biometric categorization, because if you are storing the data, you are trying to address them, you are trying to implement them into your algorithm, into your software. Basically, what you can actually do within the bank, you can do like the manipulation, deception, exploitation, vulnerabilities, biometric categorization. But there is this carve-out, which is mentioned in recital 42, but if transaction-based AI for the detection system should remain permitted, but they shouldn't use like sensitive attributes for analyzing like actually behavior of your customer. And that's very important within the financial institutions. For AI system, for high-risk systems, they are the most problematic one. There are basically 3 ways how to attribute if the system is AI risk. And just to put it very simply, there is Annex 1 and Annex 3. Annex 1, it's focused on safety components, and the AI system as safety components. So basically, we do apply them. Actually, that's fun, but also it's also if you're developing some toys, if you have business in civil aviation and you are using AI as safety component in your product, it's also heavily regulated by AI Act, and you need to fulfill many obligations from AI Act. Some of them, there is like Part A and Part B in Annex 1, and there will have slightly different regimes, but they are not that interested for financial regulations. But let's say also like lifts, if they do have this AI intercom, that's also a high-risk AI system. And what's very important for financial sector is actually Article 3, Article 6.2, Annex 3. AI system explicitly listed in Annex 3 are presumed high risk, and very importantly, creditworthiness assessment, insurance risk assessment, both of them are heavily regulated because it's also slightly connected to exploitation on vulnerabilities. Because if somebody was sick in the past, probably like their payment to the insurance should be higher, you know, like how the probability works, and we need to somehow address that. And there is Annex AI system always qualify hazards where they perform profiling of natural persons that just override. There is also some derogation if you are using, let's say, judges. If they use, because they are providing of justice, it's also like every system used within the courts, it's considered as high risk, but this is the carve out, for example, which is good for faculty of law or from some justice ministries, because it says you that there is like no significant risks and the AI only perform narrow preparatory or supportive tasks. Let's say, let's find this case law. It shouldn't be considered as high risk if used within the justice system. This is just a very narrow task, even if it's AI used within AI system. So, and what's the problem? It's point 5 in Annex 3. So we have this creditworthiness assessment and credit scoring. AI used to evaluate creditworthiness of natural person. Explicit exclusions are AI used solely for financial fraud detection and insurer risk assessment pricing. Also life insurance, health insurance. All of this system are considered automatically high risk, and you do have like many obligations which you need to actually fulfill. And what's also important, I will come back to the Article 40, Recital 42 of AI Act, profiling versus fraud analytics. Yeah, what's the difference over there? Because even like if in any fraud analytics, you have embedded some profiling. So you need to know just you cannot use like specific or sensitive attributions in order to fraud analytics. So there should be presumption of innocence, person judge on actual behavior, not AI predicted behavior that actually happened in the States, but we don't have time to cover that. There is a prohibition AI predicting criminal offenses based solely on profiling or personality traits, nationality, residence, debt level, type of car, and all of your assets. And it needs to be objective and verifiable facts, reasonable suspicion, and always there needs to be a human in the loop. That's the principle which is deeply embedded into GDPR, also within the AI Act and your obligations. So prohibition doesn't cover AI fraud analytics, transaction-based, not profiling system assessing likelihood of financial fraud. That should be not treated as high-risk system within financial institutions. Roles. To know which obligation you have, you need to know what you are actually. So there are like many other important distributor and so on, but there are only 2 important in practical life. You are either provider or deployer. If you're a provider, you are providing AI service, basically ChatGPT or OpenAI as company or some other companies. They are providers. Deployer, that's usually a company who actually using this software. But what's very important, deployer, you cannot outsource your reliability, and you cannot say that some software is AI Act compliant. It's not working like that. In the very beginning of 2018, when there was like GDPR boom, you know, they're constant everywhere, and even some stores were selling GDPR-proofed hard disk. You know, it's processing regime. It's not possible to have. It's about the process, not about the product, and it's very similar with the AI Act. You cannot outsource your responsibility. You need to establish some human in the loop treatment. You need to have some logging, and you will. I will explain that very shortly. But be very careful. What's very important in Article 25, and that's very important for financial institution. Let's use some ChatGPT tool for our internal purposes. You can scale it. You can add database or some reg database. It's very possible that you wanna develop also your own based on your own data, on your data structures and so on. That's what I've seen in the practice. And what's actually happening if you are using AI system provided by third company, and you are putting your name, or you are doing substantial modification, which you are doing if you're using general large language model, and you are training this specific large language model to the for some specific task. Basically, you are becoming not the deployer, but you're also provider. And that's the problem, because usually there is, by default in the law, there is the sentence in Article 25, yeah, if it's happening, then original provider is obliged to provide you all documentation, certification as needed, unless it is prohibited by the contract. If you're contracted with ChatGPT, Gemini, or Code, always there is the sentence, you cannot do substantial modification or so, or if you can, you need to pay higher prices because of the elevated risk for them. So be careful, because if you just do that without the permission, you have just basic API, you will become deployer. Basically, you will be in the breach of Article 16 and 23 because you don't have this documentation, and the original provider does not want to provide it without additional payment usually. So that's very important, that from the deployer you can easily become a provider, and that's true. If you remember my first example about that, AI system, ChatGPT in HR department. Let's put 10 CVs and just evaluate, like HR, it's considered by Annex 3 by high-risk system. So if somebody do that, basically you made substantial modification to the system of AI, and therefore from the general like no-risk system, you have like high-risk system. Also, the provider regulations are from approximately Article 9, 10, 11, 17, also 43, 49, some conformity assessment, CE marking, and so on. Deployer obligations are basically in the Article 29. Some of them are also in 26. So you need to use the AI system in accordance with provider, financial institutions, and some human oversights. That's also very important. There are some interaction with financial institutions. So basically, for example, for Article 17 quality management system, you can rely on existing qualified or existing governance system based on other banking laws, but you still need to have in place risk management system, post-marketing monitoring, serious incident reporting in GDPR, because they are not covered by financial institutional regulations. And just, I know that I have -5 seconds, but let's do it quickly, and that's the most important part, fundamental right impact assessment, Article 27. If you are familiar with data protection impact assessment, yeah, it's pain, usually, if you're in DPO or you're doing privacy, long documents, long risk, and so on. It's not the best job to do, but it's very interesting. And in this data protection impact assessment, you are only assessing right of privacy, basically. You can do it more technocratic, more right-oriented way, that you can take ISO, you can be more, let's say, linguistic. But we do have very similar things in AI risk. If you are using, this is mandated for all public bodies, but also for all financial institutions, which are mentioned creditworthiness in Annex 3.5. So therefore, you need to have, before placing any AI system, which is somehow connected to life insurance, creditworthiness, and so on, you need to do this fundamental right impact assessment and report the, actually like the result to the market surveillance authority in your country. And that's the problem, because how it should be done, you should evaluate all of the rights from Charter of freedoms and rights of European Union. Therefore, it could, but there should be some guideline for AI of it, but it is not yet accessible. So we will see how what it will be and how it will be. But what I see right now as a regulatory problem is like DPI versus fundamental right impact assessment. Basically, for this Article 6, 7, 8. You can use DPIA, so you don't need to actually reassess system from privacy perspective within the fundamental right impact assessment. It is what's already done, but you need to also evaluate all of the other obligations, which is kind of a long list of the rights. And there is like also the type of approach, even if you're more technocratic, that we are like ISO certification 27001, 27701, and others, which are very, let's say, technical based, that fire, that's the risk for the rights, yeah. Or you are more like a right-based approach that, yeah, does that actually deprive me of any of my freedom and so on. So that will be, we will see what will happen with that. Supervisory enforcement, usually big fines and some special mechanism for single supervisory authorities for financial institution, as some prudential risk needs to be actually must be reported to European Central Bank. That's it. Thank you very much.